See the young puppies rip, tear and chew. By instinct, they are carnivore experts. Here in Australia, there's a group of self-styled experts, the Pet Food Review Working Group, who define pet food as food for dogs or cats, including all types of dry, semi-moist, retorted, pasteurized, chilled, frozen, and other food manufactured for consumption by domestic dogs or cats, including pet meat. The working group consultant, Professor Caroline Mansfield, told radio listeners that dogs are not carnivores, but omnivores, and that
food, or if you are looking at, a dry food or a tin food or, a dog roll, I think it's appropriate for you to do your research and see how long the product has been around, whether the manufacturer is reputable.
They've been our companions for so many thousands of years, but unlike us, their diets, they seem to be immune from the storm of food fads and cuisine trends, the whole foods obsession, superfoods. Producer Rosa Ellen takes a look at the curious history of dog food.
Tasmanian salmon. Tender chicken with spring vegetables. Sounds good. If you have a dog at home, you know how important food is to their domestic backyard lives. But why do we think about their food in terms of our human tastes? Meat-rich gravy, or going grain-free, or meat-free, or a texture that is so chumpy you can carve it? And how did processed food become the norm for millions of animals? Is it the same way it became a feature of our diets? I looked it up, a balanced diet for dogs. It can include a mix of commercial dog food, human-grade raw meat, some vegetables, but with the caveat that all dogs are individual and need different things. So for some clarity, I headed to the UVet hospital outside of Melbourne, where Melbourne University's Professor Caroline Mansfield specialises in small animal medicines. We're just looking through the door. And so is he under?
He's just been masked, just induced now.
By the way, that's the sound of a guinea pig undergoing surgery on its teeth. Poor little guy.
I recommend that they feed a diet that has been verified to be nutritionally complete. How that is verified usually is by a veterinary nutritionist, and so they can feed a homemade diet or they can feed a commercially available diet, but as long as it's been verified as being nutritionally complete and appropriate for the breed and the life stage of that dog, and if it has any medical conditions that require particular nutritional interventions. I'm not an advocate strictly for one type of food or another. I think as long as it's nutritionally complete. And
does that mean sort of like for humans, unprocessed?
Not necessarily, no. Nutritionally complete means that it contains all of the vitamins and minerals, the proteins and carbohydrates that the animal needs.
What about people, this trend for having a vegetarian animal? Can that work?
It is categorically can't work for cats. Cats are obligate carnivores. With dogs, dogs are omnivores, like us, so it potentially can work. However, there needs to be some caution with that. And again, we need to be thinking about nutritional balance. We also need to be really careful when we're using novel protein sources that haven't been used before, because we really don't know how they interact and how they are used biologically. I'm talking about a lot of the new trends for example, grain-free diets. There's a lot of use of pea and hemp, for example, as being particular products, or the use of crocodile as the main protein source. And all of those are very attractive. There's also a lot of interest in using insects environmentally friendly source of protein, and all of those have some amazing benefits, but we actually don't know long-term what the health impact is. I mean, people have been feeding, lamb and beef to animals for centuries, and so we kind of know what happens and how they interact with the other food types. There's also an emerging issue in the United States of increase of a heart disease called dilated cardiomyopathy that's associated with grain-free diets in dogs. The domestic dog has evolved at least 90,000 years from a wolf. I don't know that you'll see too many toy poodles bounding across the Serengeti. They're very, very distant from those ancestors. But when you do see wild dogs take down prey, the first thing that they do go for is actually the stomach and the intestines. And so that contains grass and grains.
The soft, squishy bits.
The squishy bits that have been digested by the herbivores.
How did the tinned, kibbled, spamified pet food become a staple of our pets' lives and ours?
Basically, it mimics our association with domesticated dogs. And for the longest time, dogs were fed the scraps.
That's Jerry Klein, Chief Veterinary Officer at the American Kennel Club. Of course, there's not really any way of knowing if dogs lived good lives or long lives back then.
That started changing during the mid-1800s. And from what I can find, there was a gentleman by the name of James Spratt, which you may have looked into some research as well. Everyone thought he was British, but from what I found, he was actually born in Ohio, the U.S., and then moved to United Kingdom. And then when he was there, I think he was a businessman. He saw that dogs in that area were being hanging around the riverbanks and eating scraps thrown over by sailors. And he decided, here's an idea of making some kind of commercialized dog food using biscuits and blood meal and things like that, and packaging it in such a way. And it was actually made more for people because during the industrial times, dogs started coming into the households and being associated as family members. That's when they first started, the association being dogs being livestock exclusively, or just basically vermin kind of hanging around, to being part of the families.
James Spratt's dog cakes contained blended wheat, vegetables like beetroot, and some prairie beef product, whatever that is. It was marketed as a primary food source for dogs and targeted at the gentleman dog owner.
So that was probably the first time that an actual food for dogs was differentiated from just feeding the scraps of people. We brought over to the United States, and they started kind of considering that point. And I think Kennel Ration was one of the first brands to start making commercial dog food in the U.S. as well afterwards. And at that point, it was primarily made from horse meat.
According to Jerry, the canned revolution came when workhorses slaughtered at the abattoir began to feed the growing population of American pets in the late 1900s.
At one point, there were so many horses being slaughtered for dog food that there were some people took notice of it and they were becoming offended. But and that was all well and good through the 20s and 30s until about the early 1940s. What shifted the paradigm of everything was World War II. Because at that point, tin or zinc, whatever they used for canned, and meat was considered non-essential for dog food, and there was a rationing on that. So there was they had to push back, and there was also pushback from animal lovers who were furious about the number of horses being killed every year. So there had to be some kind of shift in making dog food.
That shift happened with the development of breakfast cereal, and the same technology was used to produce dry food for dogs and cats. Then there's Dr. Tom Lonsdale's take.
Imagine a pack of dingoes out there in the arid, dry centre of Australia, hunting for their next meal. They would work in a pack structure, probably 5 or more if they could, in order to help them bring down, for instance, a kangaroo. And they would be chasing the kangaroo through the hot, arid interior and going to great lengths. What do they get? Well, they get a huge amount of physical exercise and mental stimulation in the hunt. Once they arrive at the kill, well, this is a fantastic time of celebration. They made the kill, and then the exhilaration, the feeding frenzy, the ripping, the tearing, the chewing, that gives them a huge high, a chemical high, so the endorphins circulate in the brain. Endorphins in the brain then stimulate the immune system. This is fantastic for their pack good health, their individual good health. Simultaneously, whilst this is occurring, they're cleaning their teeth, and they've got an amazing set of teeth, 42 in total, each with its own separate function, but the canine teeth for sinking into the neck of the prey and then the ripping and tearing of the meat off the bones. They slurp down slops out of the can or pulverized grain made into little nuggets that they have to scoop up, vacuum up from the bowl. If we were really being responsible, we'd say everything that our pets eat should become complete with fur, feathers and fins. But happily for us, we don't have to be totally rigid in our view. We can just simply give them raw meaty bones, not necessarily for human consumption. There's plenty of availability of chicken frames after the meat's been cut off for human consumption, but you're left with the cartilaginous carcass, bearing in mind that the chicken frames are from 5.5-week-old birds. That's how old they are when they slaughtered for human consumption. And you're left with these chicken frames. So you've got that for average dogs. Look, people don't need to take to this all at once instantly. They need to think it through and just travel cautiously. They don't have to be feeding the sheep's head to their dog straight away. That comes later.
I think there are some issues with that. I think every diet should be assessed for nutritional completeness. There are some concerns with shedding of pathogens with raw diets. Not necessarily that the animals that are consuming that diet themselves will become sick, but they may have an increased risk of shedding pathogens, which means that they are a risk to the people that are around them, particularly the elderly and the very young.
And that comes with handling raw meat and having it around the house, is that it?
Yeah, partly it's handling of the raw meat, and so it's even having the raw meat in the fridge, but it's also they can shed infectious organisms in their faeces.
But what about the processed dog food? Is it strange that it's now the recommended diet for animals? Professor Caroline Mansfield.
It sounds like you are saying that it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think animals are living longer now than they ever have before. I think veterinary care is better than it's ever been. The bond between animals and their owners is better than it's ever been. In terms of processed food, it's the quality. You can have an unprocessed diet that's really poor quality. I think you should look beyond the hype of a product, and I think you should look for what research, if you are looking at a commercial product, whether it's a commercial BARF product, so, you know, a bone and raw food product, or if you...
BARF? I haven't heard that.
So biologically appropriate raw food or bone and raw food, or if you are looking at, you know, a dry food or a tin food or, you know, a dog roll, I think it's appropriate for you to do your research and see how long the product has been around, whether it's been, whether the manufacturer is reputable.
Dogs and humans have made it through the world together for tens of thousands of years. If humans are still figuring out what's good to eat, I guess dogs will have to wait a bit longer. Good girl.
Rosa Ellen on the kibble trail of pet food, and this is Blueprint on RN.
Clearly, the puppies have no say. It's the junk pet food manufacturers and vets who control the message. Please help the puppies. Please contact your Member of Parliament at www.aph.gov.au. Let's stop the mass poisoning of pets by giant multinational corporations. Let sanity, science and fairness prevail.